Greetings and salutations, comrades. Hope this finds you well. So this video was pointed out to somebody, or to me by somebody in a group chat earlier today, and it's one of the offshoots of TYT, this Rebel HQ channel, and they are basically, standing up for the CIA, trying to defend this agency as somehow having, some good intentions, some good intent, some good people working for it. When if you actually look at the fucking history of the CIA, I don't know how any rational or sane person could come to that conclusion, but it's not super surprising that you have people connected to the TYT network spouting absolute fucking bullshit and nonsense and literally trying to prop up the CIA as somehow being redeemable. I mean, Jesus fucking Christ. But again, we saw how Jank and Anna smeared Aaron Mate, an actual imperialist journalist, a journalist with actual, credibility, who actually speaks truth to power and doesn't carry water for war crimes that were committed under the Trump administration, like the, the missile attacks that the U.S. launched as a result of this, false flag operation, and the OPCW cover up and Aaron Mate's excellent coverage of that. So not super surprising that they have, people working for these TYT subsidiaries that are literally trying to whitewash the image of the fucking CIA. I mean, Jesus fucking Christ, dude. And so this is in reference to a Tucker Carlson interview that he was doing with Glenn Greenwald. And obviously, Tucker Carlson's politics are by and large like really horrible, really racist, reactionary, white supremacist. But, sometimes he does, call out, things like the military industrial complex or the CIA. I think that's obviously a good thing, right? Because, you're probably not going to hear that on MSNBC, on CNN, other Fox News shows. At least he does that. Obviously, most of his politics are really deplorable, right? So
the national security state long before most people thought it was anything more than a conspiracy theory, as we now say. Who do you think is actually in charge of the government at this point?
So Glenn Greenwald and Tucker Carlson.
See, TYT logo. This dude's affiliated with the TYT. Benjamin Carollo.
Having a conversation about the deep state, and I'm not gonna lie to you, this one is a little bit stickier to pick apart, to break down what the reality.
I mean, yes, it's pretty sticky, more difficult to pick apart. Trying to fucking prop up the CIA is somehow being worthy of being defended. Like, what in the fuck? Maybe because that's so difficult, because it's a really fucked up organization that needs to be abolished, that has a decades long track record of, assassinating people, being a part of regime change efforts, propping up brutal dictatorships, etc., etc.
Reality is, because we need to understand something. Of course, there is a deep state in the sense that there are government officials who are in their positions before and after presidencies, and that not every single person in government is entirely replaced whenever we elect a new president. It is also true that the government officials who are in these positions largely report to Congress, which is a very important detail, because you see, the president of the United States is responsible for executing the law as it is, and the executive branch and all of its agencies are there to serve that purpose. Now, the core misunderstanding here that Glenn Greenwald has, and you'll see this in a second, is that he seems to think that these professional government officials shouldn't be following the law that Congress has established, but instead should be operating at the sole discretion of the president.
Days before Trump was inaugurated, when he had posted something criticizing the CIA for getting Iraq wrong, and Chuck Schumer said, ethics aside, how can Donald Trump be so stupid as to do that to the CIA? If you challenge the CIA, they have 6 different ways to Sunday to get back at you.
I mean, Schumer's not wrong when he made that point, right? Like, the CIA is a very insidious organization. Again, having all these clandestine operations all over the globe and has a decades-long track record of, propping up brutal dictatorships, working to overthrow socialist or independent leftist-leaning governments all around the world at the behest of the U.S. empire at the behest of the military-industrial complex, at the behest of capitalism, right?
Now, this part is to a certain degree correct. The CIA does have a long history of subverting presidencies to a certain degree.
Then why in the fuck are you trying to defend them? Is it just because it has to do with Glenn Greenwald and they think this will get clicks or something? What in the fuck, dude? This, Jesus Christ, dude. But again, it's not surprising that somebody is trying to literally whitewash the image of the CIA and they have a TYT logo, in their video banner, right?
Of course, when the CIA had planned out the Bay of Pigs and then presented it to John F. Kennedy and sort of pressured John F. Kennedy to give approval. But the Bay of Pigs is also a demonstrative example because when Allen Dulles went to JFK to ask for an air invasion of Cuba, JFK said no. And there wasn't an air invasion of Cuba, and the Bay of Pigs was allowed to fail. Donald Trump saying that the CIA got it wrong is to a certain extent true about the Iraq War. But we also need to understand this. It was not the official position of the entire CIA that Iraq had chemical weapons. It was the position of one sub-agency that was specifically oriented towards chemical weapons. They used the testimony of one witness that later proved to be uncredible to make that claim. That claim was then funneled up.
Dude, how he's somehow defending the CIA as somehow being against the Iraq War. Somehow the CIA is filled with a bunch of anti-imperialist actors. What in the fuck? You go to work for the CIA because you support U.S. imperialism, you support the U.S. empire, you support these destabilization efforts, you support these war efforts, you support these occupation efforts, you support torture, you support starvation, you support these brutal dictators. What in the fuck is this dude talking about, Ben? Jesus Christ.
To President Bush in order to pressure him to go into the Iraq War and was used as justification for the Iraq War. And even then, that example is telling and it's very important because it wasn't the entire agency of the CIA. It was one specific...
Look at this, dude. He's trying to say that somehow the CIA is against war and these regime change efforts. What in the fuck, dude? Jesus Christ, dude. This is almost beyond parody at this point.
Specific subunit. Based on the history of the CIA, this is how these things tend to operate anyway. The work that could be seen as being more political or outside the norms of what you would expect, especially when it comes to fabricating evidence to try and bully a president into starting a war, those things are typically not done within the main body of the CIA itself.
We're getting back on our feet and back to work. And in Congress...
God damn, that person is just horrible, right? What in the fuck? But again, it's not surprising that somebody like this is on TYT's network, right? You would expect this. You would expect this, unfortunately. That's why TYT is absolute fucking shit show at this point. I don't know why anybody is supporting them or consuming their content unless it's to ridicule
within subunits that have a specific mission and focus, where it's easier for ideologues to have positions of power.
And the entire Trump presidency was driven by all sorts of narratives from the media about how these heroic independent generals like Mattis and John Kelly and H.R. McMaster were going to save us from the elected president. And there were all kinds of reports about how these security state officials would conceal classified information that they didn't want President Trump to have in order to manipulate his decision-making or even subvert or ignore his decision-making, like when he would tell them to withdraw troops from Syria and they would lie to him and pretend they did when they just moved them instead.
See, with this, we need to understand something. You see, war is declared by Congress, and that's very, very important, especially when you consider that the president is the one that has administrative control over the military. The president is only supposed to be using the military in ways that Congress approves of. Now, I personally disagree with this.
That's not fucking true at all. I mean, for God's sakes, look at all the places the United States is still bombing the fuck out of right now. We don't have declarations of war against, different countries in Africa. We don't have declarations of war against Yemen, even though we're aiding and abetting that genocide there. We're aiding and abetting the Israeli state's genocide against the Palestinian people. It's what in the fuck are you talking about, dude?
Essentially every...
We don't have a declaration of war against Syria, even though we're still dropping bombs there.
Approval that the military has had. But what is being misunderstood here is that it is for Congress
I think what is being misunderstood here is that Ben somehow thinks that it's worth, trying to defend and prop up the fucking CIA. Like, dude, like, what in the fuck? Like, I hope TYT is really paying you a lot for this really horrible take. Otherwise, like, you need to get your head checked, because this is an absolutely brain dead take.
To decide where exactly that goes.
But I apologize, because to people who are brain dead, that's probably an insult. So sorry, my apologies.
When these elected officials were expressing hope that these generals would follow the law as it is, they were simply stating the hope that democratic norms would maintain.
God damn, it just seems like a lot of word salad. This is very like AOC-esque. Like, you say a lot of things without really saying anything of substance, right?
Under the Trump presidency.
To say that you support the CIA and you think it's some awesome organization and end it fucking there, but you're probably doing this for clicks, right? You have Fox News in the title, you have Glenn Greenwald, TYT, you think that's going to get clicks, right?
A perfect example of this is the internal reports that recently came out about Donald Trump trying to plan some sort of ridiculous scheme to maintain himself as the president. Cabinet officials and government officials laughed at that idea, and they said no, because of course they did. Because once again, Congress pays their paychecks. And just because the president has administrative authority during their term doesn't mean they have carte blanche to do whatever they want with these institutions.
They would tell you that you were crazy, like you were a conspiracy theory, even as they were cheering for the classic definition of the deep state in the first place. So you have to be a conspiracy theorist or incredibly gullible not to believe that that exists.
And this is the thing. It's not a conspiracy.
Incredibly gullible, for sure. I think that applies to Ben here.
Conspiracy theory to say that these government officials wanted to listen to Congress and cared about democratic norms and respected the
democratic norms. Like, you think we have a fucking democracy in the United States? If so, I have some nice swampland I'd like to sell you, Ben.
Constitutional structure of the way that the United States is today. It's also telling when you look at the examples that they don't mention. When you look at the Department of Homeland Security, that was designed in its origin to be far more shielded from congressional oversight, you see instances like
the fucking CIA is not shielded from congressional oversight. He thinks the Pentagon is not shielded from congressional oversight. There's never been, I think, an audit of the Pentagon, even though there's trillions of dollars that are unaccounted for. Like, what in the actual fuck?
Extreme abuses that accelerated under Donald Trump.
Christ.
Because the Department of Homeland Security, specifically ICE and Customs and Border Patrol, have far less congressional oversight and far less structure in place for there to be those checks and balances.
Yes, and both things can be true at the same time. You can walk and chew gum at the same time, Ben. Jesus Christ.
Donald Trump was more than capable of enacting an extremely racist border policy, one that
Joe continued under Joe Biden.
Biden, unfortunately, has yet to undo. When
you actually think that Joe Biden is going to fucking do that? Again, I have another bridge I'd like to show you.
Donald Trump arbitrarily defined how people should seek asylum, which was breaking international law, to be clear. Congress had...
And Biden is using that same Title 41 to mass expel migrants right now.
Little means to stop him. In fact, many in Congress simply refuse to acknowledge that Trump's new asylum policy was...
AOC, you notice he's not pointing that out. She's very, very quiet on that front now once Biden got...
Been a violation of international law, which once again, it is. But when it comes to something like the military, there's a long history of deep congressional oversight. And there's many check...
Deep? What in the actual fuck? Deep congressional oversight over the military? Dude, they're fucking running rampant all over the globe right now. Bases in 60 to 70 countries, 700 to 800 bases all over the world, and you think there's congressional oversight over the fucking U.S. empire and the military industrial complex? Again, I have some very nice swampland I would like to sell you, Ben. Hit me up at the email or my Twitter DM below. Jesus fucking Christ, dude.
Checks and balances that are put into place. I mean, seriously.
Checks and balances on the military industrial complex when the U.S. empire spends more in its military than the next 10 or 11 countries combined, dude. Like, shut the fuck up. You have no idea what you're
The
talking
United
about.
States Constitution says that we're not even supposed to have a standing army.
The United States Constitution, like, that fucking means anything.
And that's why the army has to be reauthorized every
Jesus
2 years.
Christ.
Otherwise, it will cease to exist. If they don't pass the National Defense Authorization
Oh my
Act at least
God,
once
dude.
every 2 years,
What a
literally
absolute
the
fraud.
army is disbanded and loses funding. It's simply an older institution that has more built-in controls, not something like the Department of Homeland Security that was
Neither of those have any type of control or fucking oversight, dude. Money printer goes for all of those agencies you just talked about. What type of oversight, man? There's none.
built under the Bush administration, largely to exist outside of judicial and congressional oversight. And what
You
oversight there
think the fucking CIA doesn't either, Ben? Like, god damn.
has
dude.
been minimal at best.
And this was celebrated while at the same time they would say, if you say that there's a deep state in the United States, which is nothing more than what Dwight Eisenhower warned about, a permanent power faction in Washington that rules the country regardless of the outcome of election.
So here's the evidence that won me over. Famously, people say if you want to know who's really in charge, who you're not allowed to criticize. Republicans and Democrats never criticize the national security state. I mean, Republicans are happy to go after the IRS or the Education Department. I can't remember the last time a Republican leader meaningfully criticized DOJ or the Pentagon. And of course, Democrats are exactly the
I
same.
mean, and Trump somewhat, criticized them while still carrying out, the bidding of the U.S. empire and U.S. imperialism. He never actually scaled back anything, so I take a little bit of issue with that.
And this is the final half-truth that they present. It is true that Democrats are very rarely critical of the military-industrial complex. But that's not because of some sort of grand conspiracy. That's because of what we already know is that the United States has an extreme amount of money in politics. And of course, defense contractors have huge influence in Washington, D.C. So the reason you're seeing this deep state be very unified with Congress and most Democrats in Congress and most Republicans, to be clear, is because the military generals work with the defense contractors on a regular basis.
Again, I don't think what you're saying there, Ben, that Glenn Greenwald would argue against any of that. So, like, what the fuck? How is that refuting what Glenn Greenwald just said? It's not.
And they have working relationships. And those defense contractors also have working relationships with these people in Congress. And it turns out there's this monetary interest coming from the military-industrial complex to keep war going.
Yes, no shit, Sherlock. You're not telling us anything we don't know. You're not telling Glenn Greenwald anything he doesn't
That is why you don't see many Democrats or Republicans criticizing the United States foreign policy, and why you see Democrats continue to increase the military budget. But it's not because there's some sort of secret deep state working behind the scenes. It's just because Democrats love defense contractors just as much as the Republicans do. So what they're telling you is this deep state to undermine Trump is just the standard politics of the military-industrial complex trying to make a profit off of the United States war machine.
But what he's actually saying, though, like, there were those generals, there was those people in the deep state within the U.S. government, within these agencies who did, as Glenn Greenwald said, have this attitude towards Trump. So again, like, what the fuck was the point of this video, Ben? Sorry, I gotta end it there. I just can't handle any more of that utter bullshit and nonsense. But again, it's not surprising that somebody on TYT's network is propping up the fucking CIA, as the head of the network, one of the founders, right? Jane Cougar. Here we go. This nice little clip Jimmy Dore posted a while back.
Well, obviously it's hard to tell who's telling the truth here.
Throwing shade at fucking WikiLeaks. So it's not surprising they have somebody on the TYT network who's propping up the fucking CIA, right?
But lately, I have
he accused Assange of working.
confessed that
Assange, who's still languishing away in that high security prison in the UK for exposing the crimes of the US empire, has, faced just so many consequences as a result of speaking truth to power, something that Jane Cougar knows nothing about, and these hacks at TYT know nothing
WikiLeaks
about.
has not had an astounding record. The way that Assange seems to be backing Donald Trump over and over and over again, it makes me very seriously question Assange's efforts to actually be a journalist and not to be a partisan. And I get it. I get why he.
God, dude, like this guy trying to call out actual journalists, actual people who expose the crimes of the U.S. empire. When you sit in your, Katzenberg-backed, nice, cushy, air-conditioned studio while Julian Assange languishes away in a high-security prison. Shut the fuck up, Jane.
He hates the Democrats. They're trying to put him in prison. Okay,
Right. But
at the same time,
so are Republicans. Let's be clear about
and
that.
now the Republicans are too, and they have been in the past. But it seems like Assange has picked a side, and
shut the fuck up.
And look,
yeah, the side that Assange has picked is the side of the truth, the side of exposing the crimes of the U.S. empire and these other governments around the world. And like the CIA Vault 7, this huge, data leak that was provided and that WikiLeaks released.
It makes me question his reporting. And so,
dude, shut the fuck up. He's never been proven wrong about anything while you're smearing actual, journalists with integrity like Julian Assange and Aaron Mate, dude. Keep those names out your mouth, you fucking absolute hack.
And so that's the situation we're in now. So now is he just leaking things?
And I don't know why anybody at this point will consume any type of TYT's content unless it's to call out the absolute imperialist hacks, that the imperialist pro-war hacks that they are, right? Just fucking horrible. Boycott, divest, sanction, TYT. There's a lot of other great anti-imperialist sources and voices out there to support. Rania Kalik, Danny Haifong, the folks at the Gray Zone, Ben Norton, Max Blumenthal, Aaron Mate, Electronic Intifada, Mint Press News, etc., because TYT ain't fucking it. I mean, propping up the fucking CIA. Quick shout out to the 2 Uber comrades supporting me on Patreon, my partner and independent left news. Like the video if you like the damn video. Subscribe for more content.